Hello, I'm Steve Shermett, and you are watching Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts. We take a look at archaeology and see how it ties into the Bible. And I have a treat for you. We're going to go through a series dealing with the temple in Jerusalem. Now, some of the material you might have seen on Walking with Messiah, but some of it's new just for you. So we're going to look at the significance of the temple. We're going to look at the future temple, and we're going to look at the location of the temple. So I hope you can stay with me for all 3 episodes. We'll start off with the significance of the temple in Jerusalem. Obviously, it's not there now, so I'm talking about the significance to ancient Israel and ancient Judaism. Its importance cannot be overstated. The temple was the center of the spiritual life of the Jewish people. In fact, a great sage in Judaism who's quoted in the Mishnah, his name is Shimon HaTzadik, which means Simon the Righteous One. He's also mentioned in Josephus, the book of Maccabees, 2nd Maccabees, and the writings of Pirkei Avot, which almost all observant Jewish people are familiar with. Pirkei Avot, which are the sayings of our fathers, says this, and I quote, Shimon the Righteous, Shimon HaTzadik, was among the last surviving members of the Sanhedrin. He would say, the world stands on 3 pillars: Torah, the service of God, and deeds of kindness, or loving deeds. So according to Shimon HaTzadik, he says the world stands on 3 pillars: the Torah, the service of God, and deeds of kindness. However, the service of God is referring to the temple service. That is what the priests did with the sacrifices and when the people brought their offerings. That's the service of God. So according to Shimon HaTzadik, the world stands on, the world requires, the world needs the temple. Like I said, the importance of the temple in ancient Jewish thought and biblical thought cannot be overstated. If you want to know original Judaism, you have to know the temple. No temple, you got to know Judaism. But if there's no temple, there's no Judaism. They go hand in hand. The temple was the only place on the planet where God promised to meet with his people. The temple was the only place on the planet where atonement could be made. Here's what God said about his temple. I'm reading from 2 Chronicles, chapter 7, verse 16. I have chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. Now, this temple that God's eyes were always supposed to be on and his heart would always be there was magnificent. The one that Solomon built was so beautiful. Look at what 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verses 5 through 9 says about this temple. The main room was paneled with cedar and overlaid with fine gold. The main room was overlaid with gold? Holy cow! In which were worked designs of palm trees and chain patterns. The king decorated the temple with beautiful precious stones and with gold. He used the gold to overlay the temple walls, the rafters, the entryways, and the doors. And on the walls, the workers carved designs of winged creatures. 25 tons of gold were used to cover the walls of the most holy place. So the Holy of Holies itself had 25 tons of gold. The main room was also covered in gold. Verse 9, 20 ounces of gold were used for making nails, and the walls of the upper rooms were also covered with gold. So I did a little calculating. I took 25 tons of gold, and I calculated it by average gold prices in today's world. The Holy of Holies had about $1 billion worth of gold in it. Just the Holy of Holies. Think about it. Who saw it? The high priest was only allowed to go in there once a year. The rest of the time it stood empty. But it was considered the place of God's presence. And so it was done magnificently with $1 billion of gold. That temple that Solomon built, he built it around 900 BC, and it stood for about 400 years. I mean, think about that for a minute. 400 years? When we read the Bible, these huge time frames, we just throw them out there. I live in the United States of America. Our country was born about 240 years ago, something like that. Our entire existence, the temple was just a part of Israel's history, stood for about 400 years. I've got a timeline here I want to show you about the temple to help you understand it. You'll notice it says built, rebuilt, cleansed, destroyed, and then on the bottom it says destroyed, defiled, and refurbished. It was built around 900 BC, and it stood for about 400 years. It was destroyed around 586 BC by Babylon's army. It was probably around this time that the synagogues were developed. The second temple was built about 70 years later, after the children of Israel came back from captivity. And then it was defiled by the Syrians and cleansed on Hanukkah. It was renovated by Herod the Great. Around 20 BC he started, and it was finished right before it was destroyed again in 70 AD by the Romans. And it stood for about 586 years. So all told, we're close to 1,000 years that temple was there. Judaism was temporarily transformed to exist without the temple. So in 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, the Jewish people said, what do we do? Remember, the world stands on 3 pillars, and the temple's one of them. We don't have a temple. The world's going to collapse. What do we do? How do we have Judaism without a temple? If you want to know Judaism, you got to know the temple. If you have no temple, you have no Judaism. What do we do? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he presided at the Council of Yavne. When the Romans had come in to destroy Jerusalem, a bunch of rabbis, including Yochanan ben Zakkai, escaped Jerusalem and went off and started a new Sanhedrin of sorts to perpetuate the Jewish religion, even though Jerusalem was to be destroyed. He took Yochanan ben Zakkai's statement and he changed it. Remember, Yochanan HaTzadik, he took his statement and he changed it. So just to make sure you understand what was going on, this rabbi, Yochanan ben Zakkai, he smuggled out of Jerusalem. Actually, they smuggled him out in a coffin. He goes off and he talks to the Romans and he gets permission to actually meet with a bunch of rabbis outside of Jerusalem to perpetuate Judaism and Jewish leadership outside of Jerusalem. Now, with the temple being destroyed, what kind of Judaism do we have? So they took that saying from Shimon HaTzadik, the world stands on 3 pillars, and they changed it. Let me read to you. From Torah, the service of God and deeds of kindness, to the world stands on 3 pillars, Torah, prayer, and deeds of kindness. They replaced the temple service with the word prayer. Now, this wasn't totally unbiblical. I mean, from their perspective and from a biblical perspective, God's the one who took away the temple. And the reason that they used prayer instead of service is actually based on a couple passages of Scripture. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 6 says this, "For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings." So they understood that sacrifice and burnt offerings were not as important as a person's heart with God. And then they tied that to Psalm 141, verse 2, that says, "May my prayer be set before you like incense, and may the lifting up of my hands be like the evening sacrifice." So it isn't like they thought sacrifice was unimportant and the temple should never be rebuilt again. They wanted sacrifice and they wanted the temple rebuilt. But in the meantime, while God waited, they thought they would just replace sacrifice with prayer. Well, the temple was destroyed for the second time in 70 AD. Here we are in the year 2015, and it still hasn't been rebuilt. But it's going to be. There will be another temple. There's 2 organizations right now that often appear in the news. One of them is the Temple Mount Faithful. And their stated goal, according to their website, let me read to you what it says. Their goal is the building of the 3rd temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem in our lifetime, in accordance with the Word of God and all the Hebrew prophets, and the liberation of the Temple Mount from Arab/Islamic occupation so that it may be consecrated to the name of God. They have made several attempts, they do it every year, to ascend the Temple Mount, maybe lay a cornerstone, but they're stopped by the police every time they try. Just a few years back, if you were to ask the average Israeli if there should be another temple, they'd say, no, how ridiculous is that? That was old times. That was back in the days when they thought animals should be sacrificed. No, that's ridiculous. But things are changing dramatically and significantly. From the fringes to the mainstream. The Temple Mount group used to be thought of as weird, and now they've gone mainstream. I'm reading to you from a newspaper article from October 4th of 2012 by a guy named Nir Hassan. This is what he says. Once consigned to messianic extremist fringes, and by messianic, they don't mean followers of Yeshua. They mean about the Orthodox Jews who believe the Messiah is coming. So once consigned to messianic extremist fringes, movements fighting the ban on Jewish prayers on the Temple Mount are now endorsed by moderate rabbis. Even the education ministry has taken sides by encouraging pupils to visit the site. Just a few years back, Jewish people didn't want to visit the Temple Mount. They were forbidden to visit the Temple Mount. And now they're visiting, after this article, now they're visiting every day. In just a few years, they went from extremists and wackos to maybe we can get on the Temple Mount to now we should be on the Temple Mount. Another article by Anshel Pfeffer, October 31st, 2014. So that's just 2 years after the 2012 article. And I quote, "Those seeking a return to Judaism's holiest site are no longer a bunch of fringe extremists. We dismiss them at our peril." So from extremism on the fringe to now, if we ignore them, we do so at our peril. Temple Mount faithful. But the more popular group is the Temple Institute. In fact, tour groups go through their headquarters all the time. They have a museum set up dedicated not just to the past temple, but to the next temple that they're feverishly working to build. Let me read you a quote. The Temple Institute is dedicated to every aspect of the Holy Temple of Jerusalem and the central role it fulfilled. The Temple Institute's ultimate goal is to see Israel rebuild the Holy Temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem in accord with the biblical commandments. They're not just hoping and praying. They're actually making the utensils, the garments for the priests. They're training the priests on how to do sacrifices. They actually had a group of young Levites and priests go off and watch how sacrifices were done by another group of people in the Israel area, the Samaritans, and they learned from that. And then they did a kind of like a dry run through and actually killed a lamb. They didn't sacrifice it, but they were learning how to do the work. I've got a lot more to say about the coming of the next temple, not only in this episode, but in the ones to come. So I hope you'll see me after the break and stick along with me. God bless. See you soon.
GLC invites you to visit us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GLCTV. Here you can stay in touch with all of the latest GLC news along with daily scriptural inspirations, current specials in our bookstore, links to our newest shows, and online media, plus articles from trusted sources. Feel free to drop us a message or a question by posting to our page. Please help us out and like our page by clicking on the thumbs up button. Don't delay, drop by the GLC Facebook page at facebook.com/GLCTV. We want to interact with you today.
Welcome back to Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts. I had been sharing with you the significance of the ancient temple and the prospect for a new temple. I told you that the significance of the ancient temple could not be overstated. If you wanted to know Judaism, you had to know the temple. If you had no temple, you had no Judaism. And I read to you some articles about how the idea of a temple and sacrifices went from fringe extremism just a few years ago to, as one newspaper article said, dismissing these people is to our own peril. I told you that the Temple Institute is building the utensils for the service in the temple. It's training the priests. It's making their garments. They're ready to go. And now Jewish people, including those people, for the first time in centuries, are ascending the Temple Mount on a daily basis. It's causing a big stir. The Arab community, the Muslim community does not enjoy it, does not appreciate it. They hassle them, they harass them. The police are there all the time, but they're making headway. They even have already made the gold menorah for the holy place. I've got some pictures of it. It's standing in Jerusalem right now, waiting to be used. Isn't that beautiful? And I've got some close-ups for you. This is built in accordance with the biblical descriptions. And when that temple is built, they're just going to take this menorah out of the courtyard. Let's get a real good close-up. That's what it looks like. That's gold. Isn't that amazing? They're going to take this and they're going to just put it right there in the holy place. So if you visit Jerusalem right now, you can actually see the menorah that's going to go into the next temple. The next temple is prophesied. So you can see something now that you'll not be able to see in the future, because even if we're here on this planet when that temple's built, you're not going to be allowed in the holy place. I'd recommend you go see it now. You've heard about the red heifer. The red heifer is required because there has to be a specific sacrifice for the cleansing of the temple, and it requires the ashes of a red heifer. August 19th of last year, newspaper report from Israel said a red heifer was born in the United States that fit the biblical requirements. Well, over time, they examined the red heifer and it changed and it no longer fit the biblical requirements. But they had one, they could have used it. There are now red heifers available for the cleansing of the temple. Just a few months back, in December, there was an article on the Temple Institute's website. Let me read to you the heading. It says it all. Quote, "The return of pure olive oil, rekindling God's light in the world." What they mean, and I read the article, you saw the menorah. Well, what lights the menorah? What fuel do they use? Olive oil. But they've never had, since the destruction of the temple, quote-unquote kosher olive oil fit for temple use. For the first time in 2,000 years, they now have it. Let me read to you from the article, and I'm going to quote it. On Monday evening, December 22nd, the 7th night of Hanukkah, after years of research and experimentation and 3 months of intensive preparation, the Temple Institute unveiled before the public a ceramic vessel made in complete accordance with the rules guiding purity in the Holy Temple. The vessel was filled with approximately 2 liters of olive oil from olives grown, harvested, and processed into oil, also in complete accordance with the complex rules guiding purity in the Holy Temple. Do you understand how fast things are progressing? That Temple Mount sat empty for almost 2,000 years. Just within my lifetime, when I was younger, if you would have asked the typical Jewish person if there should be a temple, they would have said, no, that's ridiculous. And Jewish people weren't allowed up there and didn't want to go up there. It was against their rules. Now, these people are said to be, if you ignore them, you do so at your own peril. Jews are going up there every day. They've made the olive oil for the menorah. They've made the utensils. They've made the vestments. They have priests trained. They've discovered, at least for a while, a red heifer. We're just days away from this actually being accomplished. There's one big hang-up, though. The Temple Mount is under the control of Jordan, and it's in the hands of the Muslims. So what's going to transpire to allow them to put a temple up there? Backlash from the Muslims about this progress has been severe. Let me read to you an article from the Temple Mount Faithful website. Quote, "Jerusalem and the Temple Mount are attacked on a daily basis by Arab Muslim terror organizations aided by Abu Mazen, leader of Fatah, and the so-called Palestinian Authority. Members of the Temple Mount Faithful and other Jewish Israelis are attacked as they come to the Temple Mount to glorify the God of Israel on his holy mountain and to pray for the building of the third holy temple." Here's another article. Listen to the headlines. Arabs stage violent demonstration on the Temple Mount against 2014 Sukkot pilgrimage of the Faithful movement. 2014, that was just last year. Here's what the article says, and I quote again. "Many Arab rioters gathered themselves on the Holy Temple Mount carrying an arsenal of stones and using other violent means in an effort to stop the Temple Mount Faithful from making the Sukkot pilgrimage to the site of the Holy Temple." Things are ramping up. Fire's building. On October 29th, the former director, and this is October of just last year, the former director, Yehuda Glick, survived a Muslim assassination attempt. He was shot several times. 2 months later in December, the following statement was translated by the Middle East Media Research Group. I'm going to pause right here. I've been talking to you about the ramping up of events. And I told you that just a few years ago, Jews couldn't go to the Temple Mount, didn't even want to. Then it became legal, and believe it or not, the Israeli cops were keeping Jews off the Temple Mount because they didn't want to deal with the ramifications. The high court in Israel ordered them to allow them up, and they still didn't. And then the authorities got involved, and then they started letting Jews up, and Jews are going up every day. As a consequence, they're being hassled and harassed every day. The former director of the Temple Mount Faithful, they tried to kill him. He was shot several times. How are we going to build a temple, even when the Temple Institute has already built the utensils, at least many of them, the vestments, many of them, training the priests. They've got the oil for the menorah. They got the menorah. Then a stunning news report came. This blew my mind. This had prophetic significance written all over it. Let me read to you. This is translated from the Middle East Media Research Group called Menorah, and I quote, tighten your seatbelts, this is amazing. Headline, Jordanian preacher Yassin al-Ajulani proposes place of worship for Jews on the Temple Mount. This is a Jordanian Muslim cleric saying that Jews should have a place built for them on the Temple Mount to worship. Remember, it's the Jordanians who are in charge of the Temple Mount. Let me read to you from the website, from the statement and the accompanying literature. In a statement posted on the internet on December 18th of 2014, Jordanian preacher Sheikh Yassin al-Ajulani, I don't know how to pronounce his name, said that the Jews should be given a place of worship on the Temple Mount. Quote, there should be a special place of worship for the Jews among the Israelites under Hashemite and Palestinian sovereignty, end quote, he said. Under Hashemite and Palestinian sovereignty. He's saying the Jordanians, that's Hashemite, should have control along with the Palestinians, but the Jews should have a place of worship there. Listen to some other excerpts from his statement. This is his words. I have given a lot of thought into what I'm about to say because I know that it is the most important issue of our times. The Palestinians think so, this guy thinks so, and a lot of Israelis think so too. Anyway, back to the quote. And that whoever talks about it is likely to face severe criticism and will be accused of generating controversy and maybe even strife. Do the Israelites have the right to pray in Beit al-Maqdis? Is it permissible to allocate a place of worship in Beit al-Maqdis for the Israelites? That's the place. When Omar ibn al-Khattab entered Beit al-Maqdis, so now he's going back into their history, when this Omar guy went to this place, let me continue reading, he encountered a place of worship dedicated for those Israelites who were Christians. So Beit al-Maqdis is talking about the entire Jerusalem area, but he said when this Omar conquered Jerusalem, he found the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a place where Christians were allowed to worship. This place, called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I'm reading the article again, was built in the days of Emperor Constantine. Omar left this place in which the Christian Israelites prayed intact. He did not take it away from them. The place where Omar prayed was named the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's on the Temple Mount to this day. So the article continues. Beit al-Maqdis is the place sanctified by Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, as well as by Jesus, son of Mary, and by the Muslims. There should be a special place of worship for the Jews among the Israelites under Hashemite and Palestinian sovereignty, and in agreement with the Israelite regime, guarding the place. And the comings and goings will be under the Hashemite control and sovereignty. Okay, so he's saying not only should Jews be allowed a place of worship on the Temple Mount, but the Hashemites and Palestinians, the Jordanians and Palestinians, should be responsible for guarding it, to protecting them and keeping them safe. Back to the article. This by no means entails the harming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Dome of the Rock. He's saying there's room up there. The mosque can stay there, the Dome of the Rock can stay there. It's 40 acres. Let's give them a place too. Back to the article. Part of the courtyard where there are trees will be allocated for the prayer of the Israelites. I officially call upon the religious ruling authorities in Palestine and Jordan to issue a fatwa that will clarify their religious position regarding the building of a place of worship dedicated for the Israelite Jews. This is unthinkable. The Bible says there will be another temple. The Jewish people are working on another temple, but the place is a place of political chaos. The Muslims are rioting and even killing people trying to build a temple up there. And now we have this Jordanian Muslim cleric publicly calling for a fatwa, a religious ruling that allows Jewish people to have a house of worship on the Temple Mount that they themselves will guard. Unbelievable! Now, is his opinion shared? Oh, no. Just a few short days after this, he retracted his statement. Why? He was obviously threatened. But hey, the cat was let out of the bag. A significant person in the Muslim world called for a Jewish house of worship on the Temple Mount. We see prophecy counting down. It will be rebuilt. So we talked about, during this episode of Rock, Shovels, and Manuscripts, the significance of the original temple and the coming of a future temple. In the next two episodes, we're going to talk in more detail about the future temple. What does the Bible say about the next temple? That'll be our next episode. And then after that, we're going to talk about the actual location of the last temple, because there's some controversy. Used to be that everybody believed it was on the Temple Mount. But now some people are making a claim that that's not where the temple was at all. It was further south of the Temple Mount. So I want to examine some of that, give you my take on it. My name is Steve Shermett. You've been watching Rocks, Shovels, and Manuscripts. Visit us online, order some CDs. We'll see you soon. God bless. Bye-bye.
Order your copy of this program from the GLC bookstore by calling the numbers or visiting the website on your screen. Please include the program number when ordering.